Going to be the role models for their child, just their parents have been.
Helen, do you know where that noise is coming from? A radio
No,
or a TV
I
or
think
something?
one delegates, I've muted them a couple of times.
Okay.
That's it. So when you come in, if you can just make sure you keep muted, that'd be unless you want to ask a question, then just unmute yourselves. That'd be brilliant. That's it. Just I've got Daisy coming in. Welcome, Daisy. If any of you have just joined, wanted to just put your details in the chat, that'd be fantastic. And also, if I can just ask you to keep yourself muted, and hopefully we'll be starting in the next few minutes.
Very shortly, actually, in about. So I'm going to do the broadcast message shortly and close the breakout rooms.
I've got another person in. Oh.
Really comes this evening overnight across Wales and the Midlands in particular, but maybe also across parts of Sunday with lots of thunder and lightning, but it's the torrential nature of
Could I ask everybody to mute their mics, except Brian, who will introduce the conference very shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Connected Cities, Metroisation Railways, and this time it's Metro West. All sorts of very interesting things happening in the west of England. This particular idea of Connected Cities was created by a colleague of mine called Oliver Christopherson, and he was a very God-connected person. He used to have a very short prayer that he said all the time, and so I'm going to say it right now because it's very close to the time of Oliver's passing to the next world, or the anniversary thereof. And he used to say, Lord, please aid me in that which will cause the affairs of my servants to prosper and thy cities to flourish. Thou indeed hast power over all things. So for those of you who aren't believers, I suggest that you just simply take that as a mission statement, as it were. We are beginning this analysis of what the potential consists of in terms of metroisation in the West Country with a Councillor, Bridget Wayman, who's Councillor of Wiltshire County Council, but she's chair of the Western Gateway sub-national transport body, which has just put out a document which was for consultation, and the consultation is ended, and it's currently being assessed. So before spending any more time, I will simply ask Councillor Wayman to proceed, please.
Thank you. I don't know if John can put up my slideshow, as I seem to have completely forgotten how to do it.
Yeah.
share screen and then PowerPoint, perhaps, Bridget? Or I'll
Oh, let me come back. Sorry. Share screen. Yes, here we go.
if you've got PowerPoint running.
Yeah, I have. I didn't understand.
You should see PowerPoint as one of the options.
Yep.
And you might want to get slideshow.
That's it.
Well done.
Main Jim.
And then slideshow from beginning.
Can you just see the slides?
You want to click from beginning, top left.
So I do.
That's the one. I'll leave you to it, Bridget. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. Excuse my inadequacies. Technophobe. Obviously need a lot more coaching. So I just wanted to give you some background on subnational transport bodies, who we are in the Western Gateway, what we're doing and what our plans are. I've forgotten how to do this. Oh, there we are. Right. So local authorities across England have responded to the government's request for greater strategic thinking about transport investment by forming subnational transport bodies, STBs. STBs were identified with accompanying legislation within the Cities and Local Government Devolution Act 2016, I beg your pardon, which introduced changes to Part 5 of the Local Transport Act 2008. The Act enables existing individual authorities to formally join in a partnership to produce a strategic transport plan and represent its members in discussions and the delivery of strategic transport infrastructure. And this is just a picture of the national context, which shows all the different STBs. Transport for the North, which is the large one in green at the top, was the first one to form, and Western Gateway and Peninsular Transport were tail end Charlies, and but I think we're making good headway in catching up now. So the Western Gateway STB is formed by a collective of local authorities and key stakeholders that have made a commitment to work together to drive innovation, maximise sustainable economic growth and support social mobility by enhancing strategic travel connectivity across southwest England. Members of the Western Gateway STB are committed to working together and providing a single voice to government on strategic transport investment and prioritisation. So this makes working with the Department for Transport, Highways England and Network Rail much more streamlined, and results in fewer but much more coordinated conversations and removes the risk of competing local priorities. I think that probably says here that pretty much what I said, but we represent our members in discussion with government, strategic infrastructure providers, neighbouring STBs and Transport for Wales. We're representing its members in discussions with train operators for service improvements, agreeing the strategic road network priorities and agreeing the major road network priorities, rail infrastructure priorities, identifying and promoting strategic cycle route priorities, and leading on the significant matters that require strategic solutions such as transport decarbonisation, electric vehicle infrastructure and digital connectivity. We have a strategic transport plan for 2020 to 2025. As Brian said earlier, we've just completed our consultation, which we launched during the pandemic, but it attracted about 60 responses from individual stakeholder groups. And the STB will be asked to approve the strategy later in the year. Obviously, the implications of the pandemic are not yet understood, so it's important to be flexible and to adapt. The short-term plan only covers the next 5 years and will require monitoring. It also matches the government's existing strategic and major highway funding, rounds, so the schemes identified at the moment reflect those existing funding commitments. So the purpose of the Strategic Transport Plan is to provide clarity on subnational transport priorities for investment discussions with the DfT neighbouring STBs, transport infrastructure providers, which are Highways England and Network Rail, and transport operators, train, bus and coach operating companies, enabling more effective and meaningful engagement. I think right at the beginning, we state that the aim of the plan is to enable sustainable economic growth by identifying a long-term investment programme designed to deliver a well-connected, reliable and resilient strategic transport system that supports the nation to recover from the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic, influences the carbon reduction agenda, closes productivity gaps, and makes the Western Gateway areas more competitive while respecting its world-class natural and built environments. So we want a transport network that's resilient to extreme events. We want improved journey time reliability and the smart operation and management of the transport network through increased use of technology and live transport information. You can see here that we've got our strategy themes, which is from the metro areas to strategic and international, and looking at decarbonisation, all with people, places and the environment in mind. And those are the sort of various themes and implications or subject matters that we have to take into consideration. So moving on now to improving the metro connectivity. So we as the population grows, there will be an increased need to travel when accessing employment. Car ownership and dependency is generally high, including in the major urban centres. The LEPs have all fed back that congestion is a major concern for businesses and is affecting competitiveness. There is widespread agreement by stakeholders for the need to manage existing road spaces more effectively, and we need to do this by providing better facilities for walking, cycling and passenger transport to support future growth. And so the ability to provide a robust multimodal urban transport offer for people living within and travelling in the Western Gateway's 3 strategic urban areas or hubs is a key challenge. Within our plan, we've defined these hubs as having a combined population of over 250,000 and forming one functional economic area. So the 3 hubs identified are Cheltenham and Gloucester, the west of England, including Bristol, Bath and Weston-super-Mare, and the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole on the south coast. Excuse me, turn that phone off. So priorities, providing reliable alternatives to car use within and between the travel to work areas of urban centres would mitigate the impacts of growth and help improve the quality of place. Oh. We will look to facilitate both new passenger transport routes and an increase in service frequencies and urban and inter-urban cycle routes to ensure people have access to a full range of travel choices. And this will be delivered through the Metrobus network within West of England by extending the Metro West rail services from the West of England area to Gloucester and Westbury, by prioritising sustainable transport within Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area, together with improving connections to the wider region, and identifying and promoting strategic inter-urban cycle routes. And the outcomes that we want to see from improved metro connectivity is multimodal travel that unlocks the wider economic benefits associated with improved access and increased economic activity, minimized increase in car-based travel demand derived from the scale of planned growth, a move to a low carbon transport network resulting in less journey delay and improved air quality. And our next steps are looking at developing a long-term strategic transport plan. Work's already commenced on this, which will be used to influence future funding decisions. And the aim of this plan is to be approved by the board in March 2023. So the long-term plan will be overseen by 4 new strategic partnership groups, each considering one of the 4 strategic travel corridors in our area. Because these corridors span wider than the Western Gateway area, neighbouring STBs and strategic transport providers will be invited to join each group, so the corridor can be considered as a whole. And the 4 corridors that we will be looking at are the southeast to South Wales, southeast to southwest, the Midlands to the southwest, and the Midlands to the south coast. And that's it. Thank you. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate your muting the phone. It's one of the joys of COVID existence, is this kind of thing happens all the time. So yes, well, obviously a very interesting phase that we're about to enter. I mean, if you're planning on this scale and planning right through to 2050, that's an immensely good news. One of the things that I think in the past the UK has slightly suffered from is the lack of a longer term plan, looking 50, 60 years into the future. So excellent to know that the process is well underway. I will pass straight on now to the next presentation, which will not be live. It was recorded previously by Christina Biggs, who is the lead on campaigning at Friends of the Suburban Bristol Railways. So John, before I say anything else, can I just simply hand straight over to you and ask you to run the video, please?
So, welcome everyone. My name is Christina Biggs. I represent the Friends of Suburban Bristol Railways, a campaign group in the west of England. I'm here to talk to you about Metro West, which is a local rail project which we think is very exciting. So the west of England at present, this is the present railway service according to GWR. So you'll see there's a couple of lines missing, which is isn't important at the moment. So it's the Bristol and Bath travel to work area. You can see Bristol Temple Meads right in the middle. And it's we have at the moment hourly and half-hourly services. We have the Severn Beach line as our local commuter line with 1.4 million ridership in 2019. And we have quite a few regional, intercity and local services all passing through Temple Meads. So the West of England Combined Authority is actually quite a young organisation. It's formed of, at the moment, 3 official areas, which is South Gloucestershire to the north, Bristol in the middle, and Baines, Bath and North Street, Somerset to the south. Originally, it was the West of England Partnership, which included North Somerset. When WECA was formed, North Somerset decided not to join, but they're still partners for Metro West. We have a Metro Mayor since 2017, when WECA was founded. We call it WECA. His name is Tim Bowles. And West of England Combined Authority is very lucky to have investment funding. So the 30 million a year is the investment fund, but they can borrow off that, and they can obviously search for other funding sources. Lovely. So Metro West, as you can well imagine, did not start in 2017 as a campaign. It was well before that, but it was so it was the West of England Partnership, which preceded WECA, that really kick-started Metro West. So the concept is to use rail freight lines that already exist So we're not talking about building completely new rail, it's just reopening freight lines, but building onto them as well. So the first one is called Phase 1A. So that's a 30-minute service from Avonmouth to Westbury via Bath. So you'll notice that Phase 1A is actually existing service. It's existing lines, but it's enhancing what is now a 40-minute service from our Great Victory to a 30-minute service, which is clock face, and it's very much welcomed. But the main advantage is increasing the 7 beach service from once every 2 hours, which is lamentable, to once an hour, which is okay, and 7 beach are very keen for this. Metro's Phase 1B is the famed Porter's Head line, which is all of 14 kilometres. So it's quite an exciting project. It qualifies as a major development project, and that would be an hourly service, and I'll explain a bit later the background to why it's going to be an hourly service. And then Metro's Phase 2 is the Henbury line. So in sort of brief, as it were, so that's the line to the north. So you'll notice it's not a Henbury loop. It's proposed to just be a line that terminates at Henbury and comes back. And I can tell you later about how that why that is. But anyway, that's where we are. But it's still new stations at Henbury, North Filton, Ashley Down. It'll be initially an hourly service, but it has the capacity to go to half hourly. And then the second part of Metro's Phase 2 is enhancing the existing service, which is from Temple Meads up to Gloucester, from an hourly service to a half hourly service. Rather like Phase 1A is actually enhancing it, the 7 beach line as well. So there's a mixture of opening new railway stations and freight lines, which is a huge capital cost, obviously, but also enhancing existing services and making them half hourly, which is one of our campaign priorities. So here's a funding narrative, so the story, as it were. So originally, Metro's Phase 1A, 1B and 2, the whole of Metro West was just going to cost 100 million. And that was from Network Rail's GRIP process at stage 2, GRIP 2. So they came up with estimates for 58 million for Phase 1, 48 million for Phase 2, so approximately 100 million. As always, these projects inflated costs as they proceeded so GRIP 3 then had this tripling of budget for the Porter's Head line. And this was because the specification, so this is an interesting point about what you actually want, which was a half-hour service, that would have needed to upgrade the Avon Gorge line, and that was why the costs were then realised to be much higher when they thought about the Porter's Head line, Avon Gorge and tunnels. So then they had to think, well, can we do this? We haven't got the money, we've only got 100 million. So they decided, WECA decided to rescope, and they said, okay, we can't get half-hour service, but let's go for an hourly service. And so the idea is not to have to upgrade the track, so that means that brings the costs down, so still double what the original estimate was. But then they cast around for funding, and wonderfully 48 million was found from central government. Chris Grayling intervened, and then so now it's got the go ahead. The project's got to go ahead. They put in the development consent order in 2019. As for Phase 2, the political difference is that Phase 2 is actually in WECA, whereas Phase 1, Porter's Head line, is in North Somerset, which you may remember I said is not a full member of WECA. So with Phase 2, that's completely within South Gloss and Bristol. It was less of a problem to get the funding. So WECA have been topping up the funds. There's been a bit of an overrun, but not much. And so Phase 2 will also happen, but with top ups from WECA's own funds. And as I explained earlier, the decision, a similar decision, if you like, so just as the Portishead line had to rescope from hourly to half hourly, so the decision was made to not go for a full Henbury loop, but to go for a terminating service at Henbury. So you'll see, I'm sure this happens elsewhere in the country, that you have an original wonderful idea and then you have to rescope. And this can be criticised or not. It's just a decision that is taken. Our position as a campaign group has been to just say, let's just get this thing done. Let's just deliver it. Hourly service isn't the end of the world. People will use it. We will make sure that people use it. You know, we can't do any more than that, just to say we think that it's still worthwhile doing, even if it's just hourly. So yes, it's a philosophical thing. Then you have this wonderful vision on our left, which is pretty ambitious. Lots of lines, lots of stations that don't exist right now. And then we see sort of WECA take our beautiful baby and turn, create this new map, which we think, but no, you can't do this. Henbury should connect through. And the campaigners then have this sort of dialogue as, do we accept this? How could they do this to our wonderful plans? Or do we just think, well, let's be realistic here. So I'm titling this a realism balanced with the ambition has to set in at this point. And at the end of the day, it's the business case that has to be made, and made by the people who are funding it. So yeah, just a bit more of a narrative on the costs. So there was a difference of approach between phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1, which you'll remember is the Portishead line, not only did it need this 116 million, but it also included funding assumed of 1.1 million a year from the 4 councils. So they were expected to stump up a total of 1.1 million a year to make this service work, to make the finances work. Phase 2 is done slightly differently. So what they costed into the cost was train set hire for the first 3 years. And so the hope, or the assumption, if you like, is that DfT would take over that hire. But the bottom line is that WECA will have to demonstrate value for money, and the measurement of that is passenger journeys. So the obvious risk then is that you don't get the passenger journeys that you're predicting for your investment. The 2 risks at the moment are the Henbury line is in an area where housing is due to be built. The planning permission has been granted, but the build out is very slow. So if your houses aren't there, the people won't be there, the passenger journeys won't be there until later. And so that's a risk that has to be considered. And of course, the second risk, which we've now had, is COVID-19, where it's a desperate situation with the railway. So the decision then is do we go ahead with this? Because when it's delivered, the argument in favour is that when it's delivered will be a few years down the line, maybe 2023, 24. By that time, you would have thought that passenger confidence would be regained. And I think the other observation to make is that you're always going to have that kind of risk. Rail projects delivered, the ridership is either higher or lower, but you put them in, you put the railway stations in, and you can enhance frequency later. So, as a campaign group, we would very much encourage WECA to continue with this investment, to keep going with the plans that have been made, and we as a campaign group will do everything we can to make passengers confident to use the service going forwards. And the other aspect is infrastructure. So there's not just stations and lines, but what we've discovered as a campaign group is that what really gets people excited is infrastructure, which is not very sexy for the person in the street. But this photo, for example, is from Filton Bank, which is the wonderful 4-tracking project which Network Rail did. And it was delivered in 2019. As a campaign group, we passionately advocated for this infrastructure improvement. the concept here is that the 4 tracks from Templemeads up to Filton Abbey Wood, this is Filton Abbey Wood, the station at the north end of Filton Bank, you can see the 4 tracks. The concept there is it allows both local and regional services. It's a win-win for both local and regional to run past each other. The slow trains don't hold up the fast trains. You get more fast trains, so everyone's happy. Yeah, so red box is the Filton Bank 4 tracking. You'll see it's actually in the key. So yeah, so the area in the red box, that is the Filton Bank, the photo which I showed you. At the moment, they go through Lawrence Hill and Sagleton Road, but there are 2 new stations proposed, Hawfield and Ashley Hill, which can now serve local services better because they'll be on the 4 tracks. So, and that's not the end. So Metro West is as I said, this legacy project that WECA have now really pushed into the pipeline. But there's more. Which is exciting. So Portway Park and Ride. Now that to find that, you have to look near the Severn Estuary, south of Severn Beach, between Avonmouth and Shirehampton. So that's just about to start construction in September 2020, and that's been allocated some money by bidding to one of the beaching funds. Charfield Station, that's up to the north, so that's north of Yates. That's where some housing is going. So that's WECA's first venture into meeting new housing demands. I should say that Metro West is by and large serving existing housing, with the exception of Henbury, which has got this future development planned as well. But in the WECA's joint local transport plan, which was approved in March 2020, we saw other aspirations which we're very encouraged by. So Hawfield, Salford, St Anne's and Ashton Gates was mentioned as future possible stations, subject to business case, which we understand. Wiltshire put in a bid recently for Horsham, which is between Bath and Chippenham, and Royal Wootton Bassett. The JLTB4, as you call it, also mentioned aspiration for zero carbon fleets and new links to Thornbury. So I'm just putting up this map now, and in a second I'll show you the other map. So this is the WECA map. This is what's in the pipeline in the WECA Metro West plan. So just to summarise, we've got Metro's Phase 1, which is both a new line to Portishead in a very pale turquoise there. But also enhanced services on the Severn Beach line as far as Westbury. That's just been signed off by WECA, which is wonderful. So the blue is what we're calling Metro's Phase 2, which is both a new freight line. Henbury North Filton is on a freight line and being restored to passenger use where there's new housing, but also enhanced services from Templemeads up to Gloucester. Again, and these have both been signed off. But I'm going to finish with this slide because this is the original campaign group vision from Friends of Suburban British Railways. This is our map. So I'd like to invite you to just sort of let your eyes wander over this one. And I'm sure at this point you'll start to think of the other aspirations that you know about out there. So our map includes to the east, you've got Chippenham and a possible new station at Corsham. We also know that Wiltshire have an aspiration for Royal Wootton Bassett, which I think is on that line. And out to the west, we've got Pilning, which is all it's in a floodplain. It's a great place, we think, for park and ride. In terms of housing, you've got Thornbury to the north, which is an aspiration of our group. The line stops at Titherington Quarry, but there's another mile that could be reinstated to Thornbury, which there's housing plans. Culpit Heath is right to just to the east of Bristol Parkway, and that's on the main line, but there is room for a passing loop. So our group would love to see a station at Culpit Heath to serve the housing there. So yeah, that's the campaign vision. But we, as a campaign group, we're very happy, obviously, that WECA have taken up our ideas and very excited to see them delivered. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Christina. I know she's not watching this because she's actually on a camping holiday, and what better weather to have on a camp. But very many thanks to her, and also to Tim Weeks, because when we have the breakout session later this afternoon, Tim Weeks, who's also from part of the same group, will be hosting that breakout room. And so if you want to ask questions and get into detail on any of the things that Christina was talking about, he is the man to contact. Next in this list, she is part of the Connected Cities team. And I can just hand over to her now and explain what she's going to do. Camilla, please.
Camilla, you might like to unmute.
Sorry about that. I think we both muted and unmuted at the same time. So, can you hear me now? Yes?
Yes, Camilla. Yeah, we're fine.
Oh, good. Yeah, fine. Okay, so crack on. So next slide, please. So we'll get started. Do you want to maximize that or not? Can everybody see it? Because it might be a bit easier for everybody to see it if we maximize it. Can you do
I only
that,
see a
John?
black screen.
John, can you maximize that?
Not really any more than this, I think, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I will try while you talk.
Okay, so
can I just ask who's got a black screen?
It's me, Jelly Chu. All I see is a black screen. I don't see any PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Did you see the video okay just now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Tell you
I'm
what,
going to
Camilla,
stop the share and reshare. Stop the
we'll try that.
right. Gosh, now my presentation's gone.
Yeah, Camilla, we've just stopped it and we're going to reshare it again because not everybody could
Okay.
see it. Let's try that.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. I see it now.
Oh, good. Okay, well, we'll go at this size then. So basically, I'm going to describe what the methodology is of the Connected Cities. So basically, sort of goals and opportunities, what one would hope to do if one follows this methodology, the core principles of it, and then how it applies to this area. Next, please. So, I mean, the core principle thinking behind it is that there's a lot of underused rail network within the country that could be exploited to match the growth that we know has to happen. So we're thinking about where in the UK growth is going to happen, and Connected Cities is suggesting that perhaps a very good place to actually focus this is along these sort of existing rail corridors. It's basically opportunity, it's relatively inexpensive, and also, of course, there will be upgrades on old lines that aren't up to modern standards, but it's still cheaper than building probably a motorway or a brand new railway. And there are over 300 railway lines that have been closed, I guess, since Beeching's days. Next. So the core thinking behind the Connected Cities is to apologize, that's my grandfather clock going in the background, but anyway, is to accommodate future growth requirements. So we know that there's a huge growth that's happening over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And this is basically a good growth model. So it's a model that allows us to grow, that isn't sprawl, and that is low carbon, basically delivering communities that are low carbon and that design out car dependency and design in public transport. So you could say it is putting public transport at the core of sort of town planning and urban design. Next. So the type of places that the Connected Cities envisage are sort of along the Garden City principles. They're moderately sized settlements, but they're with very good transport connections. So you can live there without having a car. And it's sort of linking towns and facilities within about a 15-minute rail journey. And where you live or where you're working is meant to be sort of 15 minutes walk from
a railway station. So that sort of 15-minute principle, it is a 15-minute city, if you like. So everything that you might want if you are living or working in this area is within 15 minutes reach of you. Next. So it's very much about creating really nice places where we hope people would want to live. So it's about creating vibrant communities, but it's about having lively streets. It's about having streets where children can play and where people can meet, and it's comfortable, really pleasant, attractive walking environment to get to a station. So even though the station isn't on your doorstep, it might be a 15-minute walk away. It would be an extremely attractive and potentially partially protected walkway as well. Next, please. So one of the key rules is that you basically only develop up to 1 kilometer from a railway station. So that is a sort of 15-minute walk. Obviously, if you go by bike, it's going to be quicker. But I mean, if you're taking the slowest mode, walking, it's a 15-minute walk. But cycling is absolutely at the heart of this as well, but it is obviously a sort of slightly faster link. So if you look at the sort of maps, gives you some idea that, for example, the one on the left shows a settlement with the yellow circle being, say, a connected city at the heart of that community, the railway station, but the two green circles would be new development. So on some of them, probably on both the green, actually, half of them are already developed. So it's sort of saying you put in 2 new stations at these points, and then you get the opportunity to develop the other half that's undeveloped at the moment, which would be probably about sort of 15,000 people. So, and then the other principle is about grouping time. So the picture in the middle sort of shows that you could have a number of, instead of having one massive sprawl of a large town, you're actually having smallish settlements and you're having hubs, but they're all connected together by this sort of 15-minute journey time by rail. So together they would form a connected city, but they don't necessarily aren't all contiguously just connecting to each other. They are discrete little places, sometimes with their own distinct character. And the one on the right shows a sort of satellite view of the same thing, where you can sort of imagine existing stations and then filling in with new stations where the opportunities are. So you might want to put a new station in where there is open land that is developable. It's not, you know, protected or area of outstanding natural beauty or whatever. It's a potential. So the methodology kind of looks to find the opportunities and sort of says, well, right, that's a potential place for a station, and let's then explore whether it works or not. Next, please. And this is a sort of more diagrammatic, but again shows you that these railway journeys that connect the various settlements are in fact sort of 15 minutes each. So you might travel further on a faster train, or shorter on a slow regional or local train, but it's sort of 15 minutes away. And if it's more than 15 minutes away, you say, well, it's part of another connected city or another place altogether. So you don't sort of overstretch that principle. Next, please. And these are just some of this. There's so many principles to how you actually create those really lovely, vibrant garden city type places. But basically, these are just picking up some of the view at the center. So you're developing 1 kilometer from the railway station, which is at the center, with the red arc being the railway line, and the center being of the densest and the ideally most mixed use and concentrated. But as you come further out, you have the pink wedges, which give you residential potential, so villages sort of growing outwards, and the green wedges coming into the center. So you actually, one sort of village development, settlement, or whatever you want to call it, is actually potentially separated by green space. So almost wherever you are, you will always have access to a green, perhaps walking route, cycling route, and so on. And then you might have wedges of other developments. So when you put all the principles together, you get a sort of pinwheel, something like the thing on the right, which could potentially accommodate somewhere between 20 or 30,000 people, depending on what's there already. So if you're starting with 0, it's probably up to 30,000, but you know, maybe if half or a quarter is developed already, you wouldn't have that level of growth. You might just get 15,000 new homes in, but you'd still get significant growth, and it's all within the sort of 15-minute access to a railway station, and it's potentially car free. It can be. Next, please. So I think the key thing is that the recently published the Housing White Paper talks about what local authorities should be doing. So it's appealing to local authorities to zone their land either for growth or for renewal or for protection. So it's sort of looking at very much at the local context and thinking, you know, is it densification of existing? Is it brand new growth? Or is it actually an area of outstanding natural beauty and therefore needs protecting? So they're looking for significant or substantial development, which will automatically pretty much get outline planning permission. And also the Connected Cities proposes that the growth area should be ped sheds or connected cities with very positive and good delivery of public transport services. So it's, you know, it's absolutely, it cannot happen unless you have the good public transport. So it's saying initially you start on a railway line, perhaps in the future you might actually be wanting to add other sort of complementary transport modes to it. Next. Future growth, we know the predictions currently at the moment is that we're going to increase by something like over 13 million by 2050. So that's 40 years. And sort of, so you could imagine that that's something like 250,000 new homes per annum over the next 40 years, which is a big ask. And if we're not careful, what we're going to end up with is just sprawl and opportunist development happening, which doesn't relate to public transport. So what I think the Connected Cities would really not want to see is that, say, agricultural land suddenly becomes available for one reason or another, and a local authority says, oh, great, well, we can just put 10,000 new homes there because it's big enough, but there's actually no public transport. So you have to think of that, the location of that development, and you have to think of transport hand in hand. They go together. Next, please. And of course, the key thing is if we don't bring the transport and that development together, we are going to produce more and more car dependent development, and we are in a climate emergency, and it's just not going to help us one iota to try and reach the targets that we are gradually committing to. So looking at the area, sort of Metro West area, sort of roughly 1.5 million population, 2020 growing. So one could imagine that, you know, something like 200,000 new homes are going to be required. Next. So just looking at this is sort of the area as a whole, and you could sort of see the railway network as it exists, and the yellow are the existing stations, and you can probably just about make out that it's quite small, some green, which are potential new stations. So it's very much about sort of thinking about these corridors. Where is the best place to intensify development? Next, please. So sort of zooming in a bit, the metropolis of Greater Bristol is, you know, it is already to some extent sprawl, but it has a railway network. And there is opportunity to densify. So probably quite a lot of it is relatively low density. And so the opportunities are to densify part of it and to make it work as a good metropolis that is not car dependent. Next, please. And so, I mean, we're showing here sort of ped sheds. Ped shed is a term that's used for a sort of development of about 30,000 people around a railway station. So if you haven't come across the term before, that it does go through the whole sort of Connected Cities principle. But those ped sheds, so they're shown, the existing ones are shown in yellow and proposed ones in green. So I haven't actually counted up, but it's using more existing than proposed new stations. So the new stations are actually there. I think they're existing stations, but new ped sheds. So I'm sorry if I confused you there. So anyway, next please. So this is looking further out. So looking out to Gloucester and Cheltenham, where this has been a tricky one because actually the sort of the kind of 15-minute connection of places. So that diagram that showed the railway journeys of 15 minutes here this seems to be an anomaly, and it's hard to say what belongs to, perhaps to Cheltenham and what belongs to Gloucester. And so I think the thinking is that one might actually, because Cheltenham and Gloucester obviously are quite close together, that you might actually sort of develop them in tandem. And I think probably potentially you could get sort of something like 220,000 people accommodated in that zone. Next, please. So Chippenham, again, there is the issue around Melksham and whether Melksham looks to the north or to the south. And we'll probably hear more about that in the next talk. But I think that the issue here is that the formula, the sort of Connected Cities formula is applied to sort of raise the discussion and the debate. And it's not prescriptive. It sort of says, this looks like a potential connected city or a good place to develop. It's then up to the local circumstances, the local people, the travel habits. So it's very interesting that, you know, people will have sort of cultural memory of how they traveled. It's not always the most sensible travel pattern, and it's often difficult to slightly break those travel patterns. So I think one has to be flexible, and it's very much about local consultation to get that right. Next, please. Next, John. Did we? Oh, yeah, thanks. So, I mean, we've got, you know, the potential for quite significant growth in this area. So this is Greater Chippenham. You add them all up, there's 50, 60, sort of 65,000, which, you know, is a chunk of the potential requirement. And again, it's just using the existing railway network. Next, please. And this is Greater Trowbridge. So this is basically the number of existing stations, ped sheds around some of them, and then some proposed new stations, which I think are old existing stations. So it's repurposing potentially closed stations. So in contemporary times, it is more or less a new station because of you know, the regulations and so on. Next, please. We've got an existing population of about 100,000. So you can probably, you know, if you're saying pro rata, the amount of uplift that you could expect, you could probably get well on the way or beyond the projected requirements. But what is very clear is that this is an area that probably is, the whole of the sort of Metro West area is probably an area that's going to see perhaps pro rata slightly greater growth than the UK average. But I think it, you know, what it shows is this methodology shows that you can potentially manage to achieve that. Next, please. So here we are talking, and I mean, I think the very important thing, the first three stations there, Freshford, Avon-Cliff and Bradford-on-Avon, are in areas of outstanding natural beauty. So you wouldn't expect to actually be growing the population there. You might want to improve accessibility and so on, so that it becomes a place where people living a little bit further away might want to go for leisure and so on. But the other stations could accommodate quite a significant amount. So by putting in these sort of ped sheds, you're getting up, well, we've got 33,000 potentially on the other stations. And then if you add in some new stations, you've got another sort of 40,000. So significant growth can be achieved without sprawl and without basically tarmacking over areas of outstanding natural beauty. Next. And this just, I think I like these aerial views because they show sort of the real situation on the ground as it exists today compared to the sort of map analysis or diagram, which shows, for example, that there's a floodplain. But when you look at the two together, you can very quickly get an idea of where it would be logical, where you can see that you've got already some village or residential development on the west side. To the north, almost slightly northwest, or to the west of the railway in the north, you've got the light industrial estate employment zone. So, you know, would you, if you avoid the floodplain, you might actually densify to the south and add some more employment land and light industrial to the south. You can, in the sort of green segments either side of the floodplain on the eastern side, you could potentially get some more development happening. So it is about sort of just looking at the realities of what is happening on the ground, what exists already, what kind of barriers are there, which, you know, when you look at the map, you see the floodplain. The floodplain doesn't necessarily show up on the satellite view, but when you actually think about that, the floodplain is a very clear barrier. And then there are things to other barriers, obviously, to overcome and to work with, such as either motorways or what the railway line itself and how that's dealt with and so on, and how the local network. So ideally, obviously, you're hoping that the local road network already has bridges over the railway so that one side isn't cut off from the other side and so on. Next, I think that's the end. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. And by the way, if you are interested in much more detail, because I've gone through this very quickly, is that the Connected Cities book is available on the website on connectedcities.co.uk in one word, and you can download it for free. And it really deals with all the little nitty-gritty bits of detail of how you might put together a connected city. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Camilla. Greatly appreciated. We'll move straight on to Graham Ellis. Graham Ellis is a board member of Travel Watch Southwest and knows a great deal about the railway system generally, but particularly the railway system in this part of the world. So, Graham, could I ask you to take over, please?
Yes, thank you. Are you hearing me, Brian?
I am indeed. I trust everybody else is, yeah.
Yes. I'll just share my screen. I will have another go at sharing the proper screen, not the improper one. And are you seeing there, Connected Cities, Metroisation, the railways, MetroWest?
We are indeed.
Good.
Thank you.
Right, I'm here. To some extent, I've been asked to stand in place of an industry speaker to talk about rail. So although I do know roughly what a bus is and roughly what a bicycle is, I'm looking essentially at the rail and some of the rail aspects here. Tina has taken a good look earlier on at the Bristol area, and as I live out in what I consider to be part of the Greater Trowbridge area, I'm going to look to that for examples and say, what's the rail industry going to make of it when you come along and say, hey, can we have these connected cities? What's going to affect there? So that's what I made of Greater Trowbridge, and I included Melksham within it because I see growth there towards Trowbridge rather than towards Chippenham. That's a discussion for us to have later. And you'll notice there on existing stations, maximum journey time between existing stations, 9 minutes. The extra stations that Camilla mentioned are shown there in red, and the grey in Holt is a rather more dubious one, a little bit further into the future at Holt. Now, one of the big things, if I'm a railway operator looking at running within a connected city, is all these dotting trains that start off to the north of it, go to the south of it, and don't really provide any service whatsoever in connecting the various parts of the city. So there you go, and that's a network I drew up with the bluish lines being half-hourly cross-country trains running from places like Plymouth to places like Edinburgh, which is really not going to do you much good as you start going up and down Filton Bank. And then the green ones are the Great Western services, the red ones are the South West Railway services. And as soon as you start doing this here, you start looking at long distance, but not for us, interaction. You start looking at freight. One of the good diversion rates from Southampton to the Midlands and North comes up through Westbury, through Melksham, and up to the north. Lots of quarries in Somerset, which for a reason I've not quite worked out, seems to be in the Western Peninsula, not in the Western Gateway. And then you have little things like HS2 construction coming along with quarries at Salisbury and track construction actually in the area at Westbury, lots more trains potentially there. And as soon as you start looking at traffic capacity, hey, we got two lines, what's the problem? The problem is you set off a train to call out all the intermediate stations, and then you can't set an express off for 15 to 20 minutes behind it because it will catch up. And whilst Tina mentioned things like Coldpit Heath with one train overtaking another, realistically, the train being overtaken has to spend a considerable amount of time, and you also start hitting reliability issues. You also hit things like conflicting movements. In the Bristol area at the moment, you find that we have issues that trains can't even get into Parkway anymore. They come out the bank to Bristol, to Filton Abbey Wood, and they can't get into Parkway because there's too many express trains going from South Wales to London already through the area. We got particular issues here with single line sections where a problem with north to south trains reflects into a problem into south to north trains with reliability over long distance. And there you go, there is Melksham. And I put together a totem with that, labeling it Greater Trowbridge. And there we go. How do we feel after lockdown? Well, actually, all these are post-lockdown pictures. This is what you've got at the moment. You've got a Plymouth to London train, which has been diverted through our way. You've got a freight train, and you've got a passenger train on a section of single line that takes 15 minutes to traverse. So you can't really get very much through there. And then the frequency needs. Do we actually need a frequency of trains? Well, let me give you Melksham as an example. 10 years ago, we had 2 trains each way a day, and the description was they were too early and too late. And we had 3,000 passenger journeys per annum, which is 0.1 passenger journeys per resident per annum. We're up to 8 trains each way a day now, 75,000 journeys per annum. I'll tell you why that stopped at that point in a minute. And that's now up from 0.1 to 2.5 journeys per resident. And you'll find that the Trans-Wilts Community Rail Partnership and ourselves are taking a conservative view of 250,000 journeys per annum, which is 10 per resident in a few years' time. That is, yes, 100 times growth of what it was a decade ago to what it will be a decade in the future. If you think that's over-optimistic, look at my 10 journeys per resident. Bradford-on-Avon is currently achieving 45 journeys per resident. And reliability and information when things go wrong. And believe you me, things can go wrong. That is what is so important. It gives the rail industry the heebie-jeebies. Just from this morning, yes, it really is this morning, there is the sleeper train that came up through Melksham last night, failed at Chippenham, 168 minutes late into Swindon. And the local trains, 25 minutes late. That misses a connection at Trowbridge and so forth. People want a clock face service, and they want the trains to run for longer hours. So this is what comes through to the rail industry. And of course, a train running mid-evening especially ain't going to make a profit. But that diagram at the top left shows the train going to destination X, otherwise I regret to say known as Swindon in that example, where we had the 2 trains each way a day. You may see the single red line in there, and that was the sum total of all the journey opportunities you had, the day trips. You start going up to every 2.5 to 3 hours, and there are all your extra opportunities. It becomes useful. You do want it clock face. There is the timetable for this coming Saturday, and oh my goodness, you try and work out, it ain't regular. And look at this, last train 10 to 7 in the evening, great for an evening out, not. How do you get back in that direction? Cancelled services, oh, we've got to send the expresses through. So you're looking at all these various issues. That there on the left is what we have at the moment. That on the right is what we're looking at. The incredible thing about these various proposals is that actually so many of these are on the table, so many of these are being talked about. It might look like I've been using felt tip markers to do this, but this is not actually the Craionista view. This is going that stage beyond. Taking the services coming from Bristol, the local services in blue, stepping up to Metro West, half hourly through to Westbury. And you have an issue at Westbury, 3 platforms already pretty busy. Can we have a track back, please, against the 4th platform? Or can we even run the train onto Frome every half hour or every hour? 9 minutes. However, the strategic areas for Frome is in with Falmouth, not in with Westbury. So we've got a severe border issue there. And can we also run it on Dilton Marsh, major residential area, lots of people already close to the station, but a train service at the moment that's a couple in the morning peak and a couple in the evening peak. That's a coronavirus reduction. And the service through Melksham, hey, can we please have that up to hourly? Rolling stock. As you're coming through here, class 5-8, people love it, but the doors are end doors, and for regional stuff, you really want mid doors to get people in and out quickly. You want fast acceleration and good braking on the trains. You want clean and comfortable and feeling safe. And you want climate friendly. I don't know if anybody here has actually sat on the platform at Westbury while a train is turning around and ticking over. When we had high-speed trains with locomotives on the ends, the locomotives were shoved out at the end of the platform. We've now got diesel engines under there, and if, for example, you eat in the buffet, it's distinctly unpleasant and distinctly noisy. Customer experience, lose Wi-Fi tables on the trains. Frankly, we really need suburban electric trains. There you go, there are some current or recent pictures taken there. There's a train idling in Westbury. I think that was actually turning at the time, and there's various rooms there with it. But getting to the station is not the lot. You talk about a 15-minute walk, but also you want good interchanges to other modes. I think I put it at the bottom here, and porous. You see there, I didn't mean to click on, I'll click back in a moment. But you see this picture here, this image. There's the platform at Melksham Station. There is the housing that was built with a sales pitch. It's just 100 yards from the station. At the time, it was just 2 trains a day. They didn't tell people that. And by the way, it's a 700-yard walk around with true crossings of the trunk A350 to get there, because there is a fence between the 2 pieces of Wiltshire Council land up there that needs taking down. Little things like that need dealing with. But actually, looking at it here, the Melksham hub is moving forward, the master plan is moving forward, so these things are at least acknowledged. Going back, enough stations, but overall speed versus service. And indeed, the new Melksham Hub website is telling you about all these things through here. We do need to get the buses sorted out. At the moment, the bus stops through the town as it goes out to Bath. It stops through the town as it goes out to Chippenham, but there's an 800-yard run between the last stop in the town and the first stop out of town as it goes past the station. There is actually no stop there. You look at station costs, you look at station access to the town, which is good, but not necessarily perceived as that. So we're coming along and we're looking at it. But from a railway operator viewpoint, you've got to look at this with some of these lines. Sorry, Tim, I've gone back to the Severn Beach here. It's a single-ended line, and there you go, looking at the numbers of passengers per annum using each station. Most of the people come into Stapleton Road, Lawrence Hill, or Bristol, so I've left those off the end of it. But look how much grey, empty space there is around. And then here you go, £3 return for 90 minutes. That's 12p per mile, taking it on mileage. Bristol to London fares, 80p per mile. Now this is anytime return fares. Yes, I know there's lots of tickets available, but you start looking at it based on the pence per minute, 3 pence per minute versus 124 pence per minute. You've got an issue with financing your local trains. They spend longer in the stations. They tend at times to be shorter trains and require more staff. They need to run more frequently. A rule of thumb I have, if your journey is 20 minutes, you really want a train to run every 20 minutes or so. That's the point of turnover. And so you end up with so much into the politics and so much into the subsidy. And interestingly, Farebox has typically been 80 pence in the pound as input to the rail industry. I believe it's down to 5 pence in the pound at the moment because of the COVID stuff. So wouldn't it seem a good time to take that final 5 pence away and make rail travel free? Good data on the integrated system, integrated fares and fare collection. London integrates its buses, trains, trams, Skyway, River Bus, and all on one card. We're moving somewhat that way in the Bristol area, but there seems to be this barrier at Bath Easton and Yates that runs out for those of us who are in what is basically connected to Bath. And that's something, again, that the rail industry needs to look at. And, oh my goodness me, where are we going to go field in the future? But this last one is the big one. Sustainable public mass transit, or is everybody going to be frightened to stick in their bubble, cause more congestion, and even with electric cars, still produce particulates and all those other various things? Where are we headed? I put something together here. Why should you use sustainable transport? The carrot, not the stick. Who's going to drive this development? Who's going to pay for it? Are there risks to be taken? I noticed in the chat someone said, well, rail projects always take off, they always work. Not quite always. You'll find that the railway line to Sinfin didn't work, and you will find that Aylesbury Vale Parkway has been a slight slow takeoff, but we do know why that is. Do people want it? Yes. But 3 years ago, if you ask people, are the trains safe? They would have said absolutely. Now they are frightened and they've got to be brought back. But careful what you wish. More trains. You know, I said we stopped at 75,000 passengers. That's because we had full trains and you couldn't get more people on them. You had the conductor walking up the side, banging on the window saying, please move up to let more people on. Longer trains, we've got longer platforms. Hey, let's move back to more full of trains, even more trains. And we need more infrastructure. We need to be able to get more trains through. We need to be able to have wider facilities at Westbury, possibly at Chippenham, certainly at Bristol Parkway. Where does it end? My diagram, my graph on the right, shows the last 20 years of growth in rail. And people will, and within connected cities they will. Hey, thank you. That was a gallop through. The thing is online at that URL there. And when I come onto the breakout room, you'll find I've also got the URL there. The presentation, melch.am. Yes, I have registered Melch in Armenia to get that, /cc. That will give you the full presentation. Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much, Graham. Yes, well, covered a wide range of material there. Excellent, thank you. We are now running slightly behind schedule, but that's not entirely unexpected. John, can I ask you, will you be able to begin the breakout rooms in 10 minutes, or do you want 15?
Yeah, we'll try for 10. We'll try for 10. So
okay, fine.
At 5:02, yeah.
So the time right now is, well, it's 4:45. What we would say is that we will now have a break and a refreshment break, and see you back at approximately 5:02. So what we need to know from you is which breakout room you wish to be in. So if it's just, all I ask is that you type a single number into the chat. So if you want to be with Councillor Bridget Wayman, you would just type in 1. If you want to talk to Tim Weeks, type in 2. If you'd like to chat with Camilla, number 3. Or if you'd like to grill Graham Ellis, just type in 4, please. And we'd ask you to do that straight away, but certainly if you could do it within the next 10 minutes. And then what will happen is that at 5:02, we'll find ourselves automatically moved into the breakout rooms where you can have a much more in-depth conversation. There hasn't been time to take questions on chat, although I see there's been a lot going on and lots to discuss. So thank you very much for doing that. What I've skipped just then, but which I'll take the opportunity to say now, is if you would like to be involved in chatting after this, and you would like your email address sent to others who also like their email address known, do please type it into chat, because then we will know who wants to have their email shared and who doesn't. But apart from that, yes, here we are, perfect example. Thank you very much, John. So we will now go into the refreshment break in progress and look forward to seeing you at 5:02. Thank you very much.
Hi, Helen, are you there?
Hi, John. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, right. We're going to go through the process then. I'm going to try and use my automated process, and we'll see how we go.
We might have to do some of them, oh, Alistair might need help, but let's do the automated first. Let's do the automated first.
So I'm going to try and run my script now and see what it comes up with. So bear with me. Hopefully it'll...
Okay. And then we'll pick up any stragglers as we go.
Yep. Right, Bryony wants number 1, does she? I think probably. This page wants number 1. Okay, Helen, I think we've done reasonably well here. I've got a few unassigned.
Right, okay. Do you want me to go? Who have you got as unassigned?
Alan Clark.
Okay, Alan Clark was 1.
Okay.
I think he got chucked out.
Reuben Barker.
4.
Mike Redaway.
1.
Stuart Palmer. Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah, come back to him.
John,
Oh,
Stuart, 3, please.
Number 3. Okay.
Thanks, Stuart.
He's gone. Okay, Alistair will bypass for now. Nigel Fulford.
Let's see if he's on there. Nigel, what breakout room did you want?
Okay.
No,
let's move on
can't
to
see
Martin
his.
Gosney.
Martin, let's see. Michael.
Or Nicholas Falk, are you with us, Nick? Can you hear us? Which one would you like to go to? No. Okay.
Nettie's 4.
Okay. She should be there already.
Okay, she's still in the room. Okay, that's weird, but never mind.
She might not have accepted the prompt.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. Let me try and speak to Alistair. I'll see if he can get on mute. Alistair? Hi, Alistair.
Thank you.
Hello, what meeting room would you like to go into to listen to the discussion? Pardon?
Number 1.
Number 1. Did you hear that, John?
Yep, I'll do that.
Can you move Alistair to number 1?
Certainly.
Thank you, Alistair.
Okay. Right, so
You're being teleported in a minute. Okay.
We have Nigel,
Nettie?
Martin, and Nettie's already been assigned.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, it's just not accepted. Nigel, can you hear me? I'm just seeing if I can see there.
I'll just try running the chat again, but.
Yeah, I haven't got anyone else in there who put down. Oh, Nicholas Falk was group 3.
Okay.
Is he gone?
That's fine. No. So we're looking now for just Nigel and Martin.
Yeah, Nigel, are you there? Martin, can you hear me? I think they're making tea.
Okay.
Right, let me just record this. I'm going to start this to recording.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to start this one to recording. There's only Tim and Andy in this one.
Right. Okay, but they all seem to be.
Yeah, that's fine.
Chatting away. Well, that worked rather better than normal.
It did, didn't it? We've only got a few left. So, yeah, we'll wait for these two to come back, and hopefully, then we'll be able to put them in the breakout rooms.
Yeah. So the one thing I didn't manage was the slides on the breakout rooms, but.
Room 4.
Yeah.
Or the room my computer is in. Oh, Tim Weeks is picking up for.
That's right. For Christina. So he should be in number 2.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Yeah. Now I did those.
That's recording as well.
Because you can do those in advance, of course, which I twigged finally. You don't have to wait
right, of
till
course. Yes. Nigel, it's just put in group 4.
Okay.
So Nigel's group 4. So we just need Martin, and we need Nettie to accept.
Yeah. But I would think when she comes back to her screen, she would.
Yeah.
They're both muted at the moment, aren't they? And their video image is a bit still. So, right. So it's just.
So I need to stop the recording before they move back, don't I?
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
So when the wait, because you know when it's going to be, because you'll get the 60 seconds countdown.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yes, so when I get that, if I stop the recording, that's fantastic. Right.
So we said we would start the breakouts. Oh gosh, when did we start them? So we're running 1 minute later than 5 minutes later than planned, aren't we? So
Yeah, we said 9. He said 4:55. He wanted to start them.
right. Well, we have, yeah. So we're on time for that, really. So we'll finish them at 5 past. Am I right? 17:05.
Does he want 10 minutes in there?
Well, yes, except that you see yes, 10 minutes is the norm. Some of them have started early, so that, in which case they deserve their 10 minutes, don't they?
Yeah, they'll get a bit of a extended one. Oh, we're still recording, John. We're still on YouTube.
Yes, I can't stop. If I stop it, we'll lose the end of it.
Okay, that's fine.
So
we'll
I
keep
leave
going.
it running. You and I are streaming now.
Yeah. They're going to get a very exciting discussion about groups.
Now.
Yes.
There's no way around this.
No, that's okay.
That I've discovered. You can't pause it. You can stop it, but then you're into a whole new stream.
A whole new program. Yeah, I get that.
So they'll see the slide and they'll get the hint that there's a break on and they can come back.
Let me see if Martin or Net is back. Martin, are you back with us? Net, are you there? Ask to unmute. Yeah, let's try that. If I do that, then...
Are you talking to me, Martin Gosney?
Hi, Martin. What breakout room? What breakout room did you want to go into? What discussion? There's a discussion from Bridget's presentation, or Tim Weeks, who's taking on Christine's presentation, Camilla or Graham.
Well, it's a toss-up between 2 or 3.
Shall we say 2 because there's less people in 2?
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Okay, because my question was relevant to either 2 or 3.
Okay, we'll pop you in 2.
Relevant to either 2 or 3.
Okay, let's pop you in 2. You can either leave and come back, but let's pop you in 2. Thank you.
You've probably got 2. There we are. He's done it. Oh,
yeah,
so
that's it. And yeah, I think the other lady, Nettie, must have accepted, so she's gone in.
Yep. So.
Okay, so they're talking in 2. That's good, and we're recording. Yeah, we're all good.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think we are.
That's all running.
God, this is non-stop.
It is, isn't it? It's very.
It's
is it warm where you are, John?
Oh, unbelievably. And
yeah, that doesn't help, does it?
The children next door, 4 of them, and they've got a paddling pool out and one of these water slides. So the shrieks of delight coming from their garden. But I thought I'd better shut the window. So.
Oh no.
It is very warm. Yeah, all the weather forecast apps are saying thunderstorms, but so far not. How about you?
Yeah, it's boiling. It's been like in the 30s today. So I think tomorrow it's going to break a bit. So it's only going to be 27 or something.
Right. Yeah. Well, that'll be nice because the nights have been so warm, haven't they?
Yeah, I know. It's not good, is it?
So you're enjoying Dereham then?
Yeah, it's a lovely place. Norfolk's lovely, isn't it? There's a lot to do around here.
Difficult to navigate your way through by car. Alan, right, I'll admit him.
Alan's back. He might have lost internet connection.
Okay.
So let me. I think he was room 1. If it's Alan Clark, he was room 1.
Okay. Can you hear us, Alan?
You're right.
Just wait for you to connect to your audio. Hello, Alan. Can you hear us okay?
Okay. I think he was room 1. Do you want to pop him into... I can't see any other Allans on here.
It's difficult to get him back if...
Oh, okay.
Here we are. Hello, Alan.
Hi, Alan. Can you hear us?
You need to unmute yourself, Alan.
Just testing mic, so yeah.
Okay. Which breakout room would you like to go into?
I was going to go into one. I had to
Okay.
come out and rejoin again, so
All right.
just pop me into one, please.
I'll put you back into one.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think he might have had some connection issues because I think he's been out a couple of times. So I've got rooms 2 and 3 going on here.
Yep. And I've got all 4. I did consider the load on my broadband if it's making five recordings, and of course they're local, aren't they? They're local to the computers, but even so, yeah. One to the cloud.
But yeah, I know what you mean.
And streaming
I'm on
to YouTube. But anyway, so far so good.
I've got mobile broadband, and it seems to be holding up actually quite well. Yeah,
well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
so,
you get like a box. I'll show you my box.
Right.
It's like this size here. I don't know if you can see that.
Right.
It's a tiny
I
thing.
I've seen them. Are you getting decent speeds?
Pardon?
Decent speeds from it?
I can just take it around with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bad. It
doesn't do the whole house then. You just
need to
carry it with you.
Oh yes, it does. Yeah, it does the whole house. Yeah. Right. But you can by mobile if you went somewhere. So I can take it from home, or if you're in the car or something like that, and you're still connected. So it uses the 4G. Yeah. So it's really clever. But you have to pay. So this is a pay as you go, but you can get it where you pay monthly.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting thought because my dad.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with it.
It's dreadful, and all the companies.
Yeah.
Say, yeah, full fibre.
So if you get the pay as you go, you.
No, we can't do full fibre.
Pardon? Yeah.
I'm doing with these companies that claim to give you full fibre in rural locations, and then when you put in the postcode, they say, "Oh no, sorry, we can't."
Yeah. No, I was thinking again here. I was not sure. And I've got a backup system just in case, but actually it seems to be working quite well. It does. It's not cut out so far. So, and that's 2 laptops on it, so that's pretty good.
So,
but the idea is if you go somewhere. Sorry, go on. Right.
Sorry, I'm just concentrating. I was just thinking that I'm going to amend the breakout room message to say the session will finish at 17:05 because that's right, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good idea, and then we can give them a bit of a heads up.
So I will do that in 2 minutes' time from now. Whew.
Yeah, it looks like they've managed to get the conversation going, which is good.
Oh yes, they do seem to be going well. I've got a little thing where I can flick my headphones round and hear them all, which is good.
That's handy.
Yeah, because when we embarked on all this, I had a separate pair of headphones plugged into each machine, which was ridiculous because you were forever.
Yes.
Picking them up, putting them down.
Because I must admit, I was thinking that if I need to listen, I've got to change headphones and then move the headphones along. So actually, that's a really good idea.
Well, I effectively built my own because there's nothing out there.
Oh, wasn't there? Oh.
Amazon don't seem to do anything like that. They might actually. I do them a disservice probably. There is something out there, but you've got to think how to feed the different audio into one set of headphones and that sort of thing. But it took me a while, but it's now worth it because yes, I can just eavesdrop on them all without, of course, leaving the main session on my
yeah machine. That's it, because you don't want to change, do you? You don't want to. And if somebody is having issues, it's nice to be able to do that.
Nobody's asked for help, so I can see.
It looks like mission control here, what I've set up.
Right, okay, I'm going to prepare to put that message into the chat rooms, and then I will broadcast it at 4 minutes past. So that should be appearing, yep. So here we go, close rooms.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to stop
So
recording before
yeah.
I leave.
Unless you want to
Okay.
unless you want to capture the last few minutes
I
of the
could,
discussion, but yeah, I think in the
okay, I
last 10
could just
seconds,
hang on a little
it's
bit,
possibly
yeah.
the right time to do it.
I think I may have taken myself out of the chat room.
That's all right. You might have done. No problem, Camilla.
Am I back?
Everyone's coming back now, Camilla, so that's fine. It'll just take a few minutes for everybody to get, or a few seconds for everybody to get back.
Not now.
Should say good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back. Having unmuted myself from the process. I'm trusting you had good and interesting conversations. My experience of these breakout rooms is you're just getting into hitting the rhythm of the conversation when suddenly the the countdown begins, which is slightly off-putting, but probably good news. I'd like to ask, please, very quick, brief feedbacks on what was discussed in each of the 4 chat rooms. Bridget, could I ask you, please, to give a quick encapsulation of the kind of things that were discussed?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, we didn't have very much time, and it was just taken up by one question, really, about concern about the geography of the STB, and suggesting that there is no cross-fertilization, perhaps I should say, but that's completely untrue. The STB, it works with all the other STBs and all the stakeholders. So I think that was a pointless question, frankly. That was it.
Right, okay, thanks very much. And I see, and other topics were not pursued. Fair enough. Thank you very much for a tight synopsis. Tim, could I ask you to talk about your group, please?
Yeah, sorry, yes, we were constrained for time. I don't know whether, was I mistaken, because we didn't really start talking until 5 o'clock, and then the end came rather quickly. Basically, we had 2 questions that were raised. Martin Gosney asked the question, why are we focusing on heavy rail? Why not trams? And he gave examples of places where a tram could work, and essentially, you know, we in Fosbury we have focused on heavy rail, and the Metroisation system focuses on heavy rail. But we're very aware of the fact that, you know, there are tram trains and trams, and we absolutely support those initiatives. It's just sort of outside our central scope as a campaigning organisation. But essentially, you know, rail, whether it be light or heavy or some combination of light and heavy, has to form the backbone of any sustainable transport system. We just focus on heavy rail. And Claire Faulkner, sorry, asked the question, you know, why hourly? It's not enough. And plainly, you know, if you're talking of a metro rail, hourly doesn't sound like the kind of, you know, 15 minutes sounds like the kind of frequency, turn up and go frequencies. You know, or better, and there are reasons why we're sort of heading towards that in stages, which again I think Christina explained. But I mean, I would have to say I support that view that, you know, 15 minutes is surely what any metro, a true metro, has to be 15 minutes or better. And that was it.
Fine, thank you very much. Yes, I've heard that conversation before, and I'm sure it will continue. Right. Yeah, thank you. So Camilla, could you give an encapsulation of what happened in your group, please?
Yes, so we decided to focus on the economy and the relationship, the interrelationship between economy and transport. And the point was raised, you know, that actually long distance travel is probably an unbelievable waste of time. And that's both probably on rail as well as on motorways, and the congestion, particularly in the area here with the sort of M4, M5 and M22 motorways, and lots of congestion, probably people sitting in their cars wasting an awful lot of time. So then we talked a bit about sort of the local economy versus sort of UK PLC. And the suggestion was that we should grow places that have the capacity to export their wealth. So it's looking at sort of land values and strong demand, and also looking where the greatest barriers are, so to help you prioritize opportunities. And then we sort of touched at the end on the sort of change in behavior in the last few months, and the fact that we are now doing Zoom conferences as opposed to traveling a long distance to meet each other. So it's about choice, but it's very much about making attractive choices that people naturally want to make, rather than trying to force them, because you probably won't succeed in that anyway. And that was, I think, about as far as we got.
Fine, thank you very much. So finally, Graham, I'm sure there was a lot of debate in yours. Could you fill us in, please?
Yes, we could have gone on for hours. The first thing we were looking at there was looking at the fares and the long distance versus the short distance, and how do you actually make the rail links within the connected community, or the public transport links, actually pay for themselves, or do you make them pay for themselves? Do you fund it through other approaches? Then we went on to look at what the pandemic changes are going to bring, and is that actually going to help with a reduction of the peak, or is it going to mean that people are going to be far more looking at Poets' Day in extremis, Poets' Day being piss off early tomorrow's Saturday, which is how Friday would become. And looking at the data, looking at getting integrated fares, integrated systems, so that people actually know what they're doing in terms of the travel. Yeah, we ran out of time.
Right, okay, well perhaps the message we're getting from this is we should make the breakout rooms a little bit longer. However, we do still have discussion time now. I mean, it's just gone 10 past. And so we have 15 minutes in which open forum, yes. So if you don't wish to be recorded in any of this, do please keep your screen switched off and mute your mic. But if you want to be involved in the conversation that can now go ahead, unmute your mic. That's key. So what I would ask is, first of all, if there's anybody who would like to particularly ask a question or make a statement, now is your do it. And should nobody jump forward, I'm sure that Helen Fuchs can take something from the chat that has been going on and put that forward. So first of all, would anybody care to make a statement? Or I can see Barony Chetwood straight away. Yes, Barony, over to you.
Hi.
Bryony, sorry.
Yes, is it Bryony? It would have been lovely to have had longer in the breakout rooms. Ours was caught up on one issue. I think the crux of it was asking Bridget, but it actually applies to everyone. It's a general point that came across, and it's not in any way aimed at Bridget. It's just an observation working with different LEPs, which I've been doing across the country, both for Travel Watch, but also for some of the transport operators. I've done a lot with Peninsula, and I've also done quite a lot with the part of the Midlands, and actually with working with Swindon LEP and looking there at it's looking at, as Bridget says, you know, you do look outside your area, your immediate area, because you're looking at those flows for people, seeing what positive things can come in and out. And I am concerned when I see comments saying there's no need to consider long distances, because that you know, people travel through extraordinarily different distances to pick up different skills or to have different experiences. And we have whole economies and industry, particularly the tourist industry, which needs those industries to be enabled for the Southwest. And, and that also applies to our skills. So I suppose it's the desire to have the recognition for a strategy which ties together, and depending on the organization you have, whether it's Western Gateway or Peninsula or another, the strength of that strategy will be more or less based around roads or rail or other modes of transport. But it would be very good to see more of a joined up and integrated approach. And I think moving towards decarbonisation and looking at a sustainable transport for the future, combined with the impact of COVID, I'd be really interested to know what views there are around the room over whether we will be looking at rethinking some of the strategies that are being produced, because we're seeing the possibilities for changing travel patterns. I'll sort of leave it out there. Be interested to hear what people think about that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I see that David Redgewell has raised his hands electronically, which is.
I think my point, and we cut too short because I was trying to talk about travel to work areas. Really, obviously, I'm on the Mayor's Transport Board, so have an interest, obviously, in the Greater Bristol area. But I think reading the Peninsula documents through, and I've read a lot of it through with Stagecoach over the last few days and First Group, there's the lack of really understanding of the role of bus in principal urban areas. It gets mentioned in Cheltenham and Gloucester. It gets mentioned in Bristol, Bath and Weston-super-Mare, and it gets mentioned in Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. But it doesn't get a lot of mention, and this is the point when we cut out, and no respects to Bridget meant by that, when we were trying to talk about Salisbury or Greater Trowbridge or Chippenham, or as Bryony just mentioned, the Swindon Travel to Work area.
I think Salisbury, David. Salisbury has the most excellent integrated plan. Bridget, well done on that.
I'm not saying, it's just I'm making the point to Bridget. It's not written in the plan, Bryony. That's the point I'm trying to say. There's a lot of good stuff that Wiltshire County Council's doing, but it's not transposed into Western Gateway's plan. So if we want more bidding for electric buses, or we want more infrastructure, or as Martin Garrett would say if he's on the call, or Gavin, more bus rail interchanges in the Bristol area with Metro West, then we've got to put this into our gateway plan. And I would say the same for Bournemouth and Christchurch. So and Weymouth worries me, because as I was talking to the leader of Dorset, Councillor Flowers, there's no mention of the importance of public bus transport in Weymouth. So it's very important to integrate this, and the history of this was it was a road board, and it's flourished out to become something different. So I just want to make that point, really. Rail's important very much in Metro West, and there is constraints, as Graham said, because of the main lines running right through our area. So there's a limit to what we can do, but we must integrate it with bus, and if the future of Marvin Rees has its way in Timbos, we'd like rail. Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much, David. I mean, obviously the consultation hasn't now officially closed, but I assume that you made some representation to that public process. I noticed that, well, first of all, before I move on to Nick Falk, does anybody have any specific response to Bryony's statement? No? Okay, Nick, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you. I wanted to take up this idea of an integrated system, because I'm sure that is what we should be aiming for, and getting away from this idea that bus is better or tram is better or whatever. A lot will depend on the situation, on the demography, the density, the physical characteristics of an area, its economic foundations, the potential. That's the first point. I think in order to get some degree of picture of what the future might be like, instead of speculating, as we tend to do in Britain, about technologies that have never been developed and probably won't be ever feasible, we should look at places that seem to work much better. What do I mean by working much better? Well, I mean houses are much more affordable, that people spend much less time commuting, that people are happier and healthier, and so on. Now, all those things are measured, and you can draw up various scores, rankings, and so on and so forth. You will find, if you do that, that you tend to get drawn to cities in Germany and Denmark or Scandinavia generally. And in my view, if we started in the Southwest by saying, well, look, we should be able to match the sort of standards that you get around, say, Copenhagen. We should learn from how Copenhagen overcame the awful economic problems it was in 17 years ago to turn itself into a really attractive and desirable city, a city where at least a third of the people cycle everywhere, and the aim is to get it up to 50%. Then it seems to me we would have a clearer picture, a vision of what's needed, and we would be able to then focus attention on specific issues, like whether it's, as we heard, whether it's sensible to spend 150 million on the line to Portishead or simply 70 million, which is the sort of issue where you can do hard economic analysis. But let's start with a picture of what a successful metro region should look like. And then let's identify demonstration projects, if you like, that can begin to bring the future into play in an incremental, progressive way, and where one thing leads to another, rather than always being obsessed with things that may never come off. Does that all make sense? I mean, it's just a simple, practical view, which I think you'd find was common in all the towns and cities in Central Europe that we like, but seems to have escaped us in Britain as we seem to rely on ideology and obscure professionalism.
So, well, could I ask briefly, Nick, I mean, are you thinking that there should be a different form of planning, one that, for example, somehow starts with a vision of the type of place that you wish to see and works back from that? Or is it,
of course we did a
difference?
completely different. We even have a planning white paper on the future of planning, which makes slight references to the notion that we're going to be following the continental model. Unfortunately, the people who've written it don't seem to quite understand how the continental model works, and probably don't know very much about the practicalities of planning. But as always with government documents, there are lots of good intentions, and the problem is to exploit the opportunity to change our planning system, possibly our governance system, and the whole idea of joining up local authorities in larger units, and above all, our financial system, so that we have the resources to do things, which, as you know, I believe is bound up with land value sharing, with using the uplift in land values in areas with relatively high values, which is most of the Southwest, to actually be able to fund the better infrastructure that people are asking for, and then to ensure that those who have the wealth and who benefit from the improvements pay something towards it. And then I think the country as a whole might be seen as a rather fairer place, both in terms of being more equal, but also looking rather more attractive than it does if you're stuck in a traffic jam.
Right.
Can I just
well, fortunately, Glastonbury does actually fall into the West of England area, and the Holy Grail is there. So, I mean, this integration of all elements is something that's much sought after, I can assure you. While we're talking about planning issues, although this is to some degree a transport conversation here, does anybody have any opinions, please, about the new planning white paper? Could I ask if anybody's read it?
Yes, me.
Or read about it.
I've not only read it, but read a whole series of comments on it, and the natural tendency being British is for people to go through and rubbish everything in it, which will then mean that the views are completely ignored, and the system will plough on as before. Whereas the sensible person, in my view, would say, yes, some change is badly needed. It's not doing what it's really required to do, and then let us learn from what works. Let us see how systems can be modified to achieve the various objectives, which are not just building more housing, but they are actually creating better places in the full sense of the word. And of course, that means reconciling or joining up transport and development. And so the opportunity is there. I mean, I don't think the people involved are stupid or even badly intentioned. I think they're just a little naive, if you like, and they just need a bit of reality brought to them by people like ConnectedCities.
do you think there's sufficient emphasis on the integration of transport and that sort of zoning of where we're going to put it?
As far as I can tell, almost no appreciation that development is bound up with connectivity. No appreciation that I mean, they define three types of areas, growth, renewal, and protective. But there is no sense that one actually should be then overlaying the developability of different areas in terms of their connectivity, or indeed taking account of the both the cost of development, which will vary if the areas are damaged by previous industry, and the returns, which will be affected if the area is an attractive one to live in with lots of prosperous people. So it's a sort of a good first step, I suppose. You know, it's the sort of thing somebody might use for an exam, if you like. But it requires a lot of refinement. My hope, whether the government is open to refinement, I'm not sure. There's 12 weeks to, well, probably only 10 weeks to comment now. And probably the views of powerful people are just to force things through and disregard all the NIMBYs who will comment on the details. But I think a few simple principles, like the ones we've just discussed, might be welcomed.
It's up to each local authority. If you're going to designate growth areas, renewal areas, and protected areas, then obviously a local authority, when preparing a local plan, will allocate a growth area where there is connectivity. They'd be mad not to.
Yes. So, but I would hope that a lot of the basic work has been done. As I say, at the moment, the local government structure is up in the air because of the white paper that's coming out on devolution, and you will be aware that many authorities around the country are questioning whether they should be one big county or join or combining adjoining districts. Then there's the spending review to follow shortly after. So at the moment, I think it would be fair to say we have almost a state of total anxiety when nothing is certain except that everything is uncertain. Now, this, to my mind, is a time when some clear thinking is required about prioritization. And I believe maps can actually provide the insights. So as we've sort of seen, I mean, if you start with the maps as you've done in the west of England, and then color them in various ways, and then overlay them in other ways, then it seems to me quite simple people can begin to understand what one is getting at and use words which aren't polysyllabic.
Nick, just one question, since you've read the white paper, is there any mention or any exploration of the idea of land value capture?
No, there doesn't seem to be. It's quite odd that we seem to deal with planning as if it's purely a question of allocating sites for development, as if all that matters is to allocate a site and it will be developed. Yet you know that most of the sites that have been allocated, certainly in high value areas like London, sit around for decades with nothing happening. So it doesn't seem that they've joined that up. Yet I know that there will be people in the Treasury and in the number 10 who do understand these things. And how one gets that joining up is a challenge I think will only come about because of outside organizations. Maybe it would be the Association of Local Government or whatever, the counties, who will say, look, just a minute, before throwing everything out, let us actually look at what works and how we can build on it. As I say, starting with the mapping of, in my view, the areas of greatest demand and so on. But I mean, Bridget, what's the view of Wiltshire? Are you welcoming the planning white paper?
I don't know. I have.
Right.
Funny enough, I was just asking that question yesterday because I am very interested in it. I want to see what happens because there are all sorts of the design codes to be brought in and local design code. We're getting rid of SIL. There's the new infrastructure levy.
Yes.
There's so much within the white paper that it's probably a 3-week exercise to read it from cover to cover.
Yeah, it's quite readable.
Yes, I would agree. It is a challenge.
All these different pillars, and
but
I think there's a lot of interesting stuff, and I hope that there will be a good response to it because that's the whole point of having a consultation.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, certainly from the Connected Cities point of view, I would say that it contains a surprising amount which we are in agreement. I didn't think in the past I would favour zoning, but I can see that properly handled, it's an extremely powerful tool that will align very much with the kind of visions that we feel are appropriate. However, at this point, we're getting very close to the end of our official time. I'd like to thank everybody who has spoken, Bridget, and well, I thank Tim on behalf of Christina, Camilla and Graham for providing that, and lots of useful masses of information. I haven't quite swallowed it all. Should you like to know more about Connected Cities ideas, please do visit our website, which you will get to by just typing in the word Connected Cities, but only as all one word, not as two. This is the fourth of the events that we've been holding about metros or rail enhancement programs around the country, which potentially could be metros. And the fifth of them will be on the 23rd of September, and that will focus on issues in Oxford. All this is in preparation for the big event on Monday, the 5th of October, at which Sir Peter Hendy will be the keynote speaker. The details of the October event are yet to be tied down because, of course, like everybody else in the country, nobody quite knows what's going on. And it's quite likely that it'll actually be a hybrid event in which those who wish to attend can, and those who wish to remain remote can do so that as well. We're currently investigating the technology involved with all that, but our aim is to cover all bases. So we will actually be here quite a bit longer for everybody who wants to just hang around and chat at the bar, as it were. But could I say once more, should you wish to have your email address shared with others so that you can continue this debate online, please do just type your email address into the chat, and we will know then that you're happy to have it shared with others. If you don't type it, we'll still distribute your name as having attended the event, but we won't give any contact details, so you won't get spammed or whatever. So thank you very much for attending. Do have a wonderful evening. It's still stunningly good weather here. We've been blessed with amazing weather for all of these events, and I trust it will continue in Oxford in September the 23rd. And really appreciate all your interest and close involvement in this, and look forward to seeing you in whatever the next future brings, because clearly we're at the time of something quite dramatic. We're about to walk into build, and indeed a degree of spend. Now is the opportunity to grasp the options that are being open to us. I trust it can be done, and that everybody will be benefiting therefrom. So thank you very much for attending. If you'd like to hang around, as I say, for a chat at the bar, as it were, please do so. But if not, thank you very much and goodbye. Excellent evening.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Could I say something very quickly, because I'm just about to walk out into the hot Stroud air.
Blazing high, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to be walking along the old railway line from Stroud Station. And to get there, I will find myself passing derelict land next to the canal, which has been sitting, which is next to the station, which will be sitting derelict, I suppose, for decades. And as I go along, and it's a beautiful walk, I will ask myself, what is the planning system, what done to make sure that the sites that so obviously should be developed at a higher density and to a higher quality move forward. Now, if you were a planner, you just simply say, oh, I've identified them. But if you were an economist, you would say, well, there have to be incentives to develop within a certain amount of time. For example, it may be you lose your planning permission if you haven't developed the site within, say, 3 years of receiving permission. And you might also have penalties. For example, in Denmark, once you've been zoned for housing, you have to pay the tax that relates to housing. So there's a very real incentive to get on with building housing because you're paying the costs until. So I think that introducing a little economic logic into the process might supplement the constraints that planners would tend to impose. Does that all make makes sense.
But both of the things you mentioned are in the white paper. I mean, at present, for example, you do lose your planning permission after 3 years if you don't act on it, and that's been the case for a long time now. You can always reapply, but you have to hope that circumstances haven't changed. The second is that there is actually a mechanism for trying to drive this process of getting builders to build out places where they have permissions, and there's a whole section about that. I'm sure you must have read it. It's in the paper. It was in the previous one as well. It's been reinforced in this one.
Point I'd add to that, and I love Stroud. I think the other point is, Graham made a good point. I mean, the housing development went up, but there was no connectivity designed to go across to Melksham Station for people to walk. And I mean, if you look at Stroud, a developer paying for a set of accessible wheelchair lifts and bridges for at the station would open up a lot of land on that site and make it much more easier. But we seem to have a situation, the only people who seem to be able to develop a station in conjunction with surrounding land is Network Rail. And I think some of that's got to change, really. If a developer is going to contribute to a public transport infrastructure in interchange, but I think we should somehow get that built as part of the scheme and not allow it to fester in some sort of...
Yeah, a lot of it is to do with the ownership within an area, because typically you will find that ownership is complex in these areas, that the railways only own a very small amount of land, which is they will use for single-story parking. And in order to accumulate or assemble the large area, you need an organization like a regional development agency or development corporation to acquire the land at close to its existing use value, because clearly if you're a landowner in the adjoining land, you will say, well, why should I do anything until the whole area has gone up in the world? Let's wait for it to be developed. So it's natural, I think, for owners to sit back and wait to be free riders, to use the economics term. And so yes, it is true that most of the powers that are proposed in the new planning white paper do exist if they were used. But the problem is we haven't got that tendency to plan proactively, possibly because the staffing has been cut back, because anyone who had the knowledge or the personality has gone on to work for a private consultant or retired to play golf. So it seems to me that we have to enable a fresh breed of people who can also not just negotiate between the different interests, but also are prepared to work with the community, who would have some respect for the knowledge exemplified by the people who've spoken in today's and other webinars, that they do know a lot, they are passionate about their causes. But again, that involves an investment in time. And on the whole, if you're, I suppose, a developer, you just want to go ahead with building houses and you'll do a bit of greenwashing, but you won't do that fundamental engagement that's required. So I come back to the notion that without the right development mechanisms, the fact that there are powers available won't be sufficient. It's just sort of, if you like, all management common sense. You don't, any more than you rely on the catechism to make people good.
I think you were right, Brian, on I think you were on the tea leaves that before COVID, I was picking up in Great Minster House and the Department for Transport and in local government. I think regional government's coming back. I think that's the flavour of the day with Grant Shapps. I think he's very much looking at focusing on land use planning as well as transport planning. And I think we're going to see a lot in the autumn about local government reorganisation. We've already seen Somerset press the button for abolishing themselves and becoming unitary, possibly with Baines and North Somerset, including some sort of new regional, and Gloucestershire's going the same way. They've started some talks. But I think the regional thing is on the horizon, and that's why I raised my question in Bridget's session. I'm not sure where that's going, but I think it's live, and I think the mayors in the north may be driving it, and in Andy Streets in the West Midlands. Well, I think around that comes the railways, I think, and the public transport. But how you shape that together, I hope this white paper on planning and any regional devolution white paper and transport fits together. I fear it may not.
Yes, so unfortunately we won't know until we've actually seen. Your point regarding, oh, okay, thank you. Your point regarding the access to land and things of that kind and the integrating of land. We actually have David Biggs, who is the managing director of Network Rail Property, speaking at the main conference, and they have had a kind of sea change in the last few years, the realization that the real opportunity that exists for British rail property is not just to focus on the little bit of land it's got, but to focus on connecting to all the surrounding land that it's got and integrating with the community, because if nothing else, it's just much more financially rewarding from them if they do that. So, I mean, I do encourage you to come to the event and hear what he has to say, because he's talking about precisely that topic. Sorry for the plug, but there we are. You know?
No, and I've listened to Sir Peter since he took over, banging the drum on interchanges and saying we need to connect the trams and the buses and the walking and cycling. He's banged ever since he took over his chair. He made he's made that his cause celeb, and as well as disabled access, which I'm very interested in. He's obviously made them every Network Rail regional director think through every station redevelopment in terms of how do you get by walking, cycling, and public transport. And I think that's something Andrew Haynes and Peter Hengo welcome. That's just a comment.
So,
well, I've seen some change.
Can I just
yeah, Keith, go ahead.
get in, please? Cheers.
Yeah. Oh, Mike. All right. So Keith first, then Mike. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to discuss this with Camilla earlier. I wasn't aware of Connected Cities before I came along today, so that was interesting to find out about, to be honest. But one of the things that I don't know if you've dealt with Canada or not, but it's just one of the things that I came across earlier this year. I went to Department for International Trade to one of their meetings, and it had the Canada Infrastructure Forum on. And there's a lot of parallels between what you're doing and what they're doing, I found. And so what they showed some case studies, a bit like what Nicholas was talking about, actually, you know, case studies for such things. And they're showing how in the cities in Canada that their growth is absolutely huge in the population. It's growing like mad. They've realized that they can't widen the streets any further. They can't get any more traffic into the cities in the cars. It's impossible. They just haven't got it. So they'd started to build some stations, not really think about it too much though. They were expanding their metro system. And what they showed was a photo of a new metro station that they'd opened up. And then like a year later, suddenly there's skyscrapers everywhere and residential units and all the rest of it. And what they hadn't appreciated and what they didn't think about was that they'd given an amazing, if you build a station, development will come along. They hadn't really organized it, and they didn't get, the developer made a lot out of it, but they didn't make a lot out of it as such. So what they're doing now is what they class as TOCs, which was confusing the hell out of me because I was thinking of train operating companies all the time when he's talking about TOCs, and he eventually told me that it was transit orientated communities or transit oriented developments. And so now they're working with a public-private partnerships where they join forces with the developer, stipulate that they're going to build this new station, that around it, they want this area to be developed. The developer then buys the land, he does the development, and the developer then also pays towards some of the urban facilities around the station, because they pay for the infrastructure direct, but they end up having to pay for some of the areas around the station itself. And to me, it's I'm just interested to see if you've been speaking to the guys out in Canada as well, because they just seem to have a very, very similar train of thought as you guys are, really, Camilla.
Camilla, do you like to respond to that, or shall I? Okay.
I'm not sure what's happened.
Well, actually, I suggest that if you go to the either go to the Connected Cities website or download the book from it, you'll find there is a section all about this. Because this mechanism, I mean, to be honest, you're not talking about Toronto, are you?
Toronto was there. There was three different, there was various different municipals representative at the event. So Toronto was one of them.
Because, because I mean, in both, Toronto's very clued up to this process, which is a mechanism that's used across the world for developing along railway stations. There's a brilliant free World Bank book that's available as a free download called Financing Local Transit with Land Value Increase. And it gives examples from all over the planet of cities that have done this very successfully. And interestingly enough, it gives examples of cities where it hasn't worked, because that's useful information too, from the point of view of somebody trying to emulate it. But for example, Hong Kong has produced stunningly good new metro service and complete new lines, entirely paid for by the increase in land that came from the fact that previously there wasn't a railway and now there is one. And as you say, people then kind of build a lot out of it. So, and it's sharing that increase in land value that happens. It's this phrase land value capture to fund the railways. And part of the great focus of Connected City is to do precisely that, to fund the kind of upgrades that we were talking about earlier, because there's no doubt about it. Funding rail upgrades is not a cheap process. We know that. But there are lots of quite spectacular upgrades that could potentially be available. I mean, in CP 6, 7 and 8, there's a rollout program that's already penciled in for increasing the efficiency of the signalling system across the entire network. It's a long process, but it's going to cost money. If something can be done to generate funds to pay for that, it can be made to happen faster. And so that's very much part of what the Connected Cities thinking is, that using just precisely the process you described, that pooling of land to ensure that the funding value goes not just to a rich developer, but to both the community and to the transport and other services that are required, is right at the center of it. And there is a real opportunity there, great. But I will check out the Canada Infrastructure Forum. I've never heard of them before, so thank you very much for that. Really.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Alan, have you, I see you've been watching all this and quietly nodding occasionally. Can I ask if you have anything to say?
Well, basically, I think it's good that you try and get something back from the developers, and that it's done in a very structured way, that developers don't win all the time and not get the people who actually put the station there initially don't make anything out of it, because it's got to be a two-way thing. And it's interesting what you're saying about Toronto, because I visited Toronto about 3 years ago, and I was very impressed with their urban rail system there. It's very efficient and very good.
Yes, the GO system, and they have a very good metro system, don't they? It works extremely well. So we're now getting up to about 1:45. Was that Camilla? Was that you raising your hand? You're muted, Camilla. Camilla, you're muted. Right. Can't do anything about that. Can't unmute you, unfortunately.
Sorry. That was just as
Camilla.
my laptop died. Keith, why don't we talk on the phone one day?
All right, fantastic.
Sorry.
I'll send you my email address in the chat.
Yeah,
the best
do
bet,
that.
So.
And a phone number, and we can do a WhatsApp call or something.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Thank you.
Good.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. Well, unless somebody else wants to speak, I say it's coming up to 10 to 6 now. It's a
Can
lovely
I
day.
ask
It
Camilla
seems
when
sad to be
she's
indoors
come?
when one could be.
Can I just give her one quick question? Is she doing any work on rural regional connectivity? So we got like a rural station hub or this market town, and then the walking, the cycling, and the bus networks, as Graham Ellis pointed out. It's just something that Peter Hendy was looking at with me before COVID in parts of the Southwest. And I wondered whether you've done any work with Stagecoach, particularly Stagecoach. I know they're doing some work as a group, but also First Group on that particular thought. That's what I wanted to ask her. Didn't get a chance otherwise, sorry.
My screen has disappeared again. I don't, oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hear you, just can't see you.
Brilliant. I'm back. No, I mean, I think that is part of the sort of evolution of connected cities will be to explore very much that. But my sort of feeling is that whereas sort of perhaps 10 years ago, we were all thinking we've got to build dense cities, that's the only way the public transport works. I have really shifted my thinking now to think that actually sort of something like connected cities, rail-oriented development in smaller settlements is probably what people A would like, and B is easier to deliver and will result in much nicer places. And it's about quality of life. It's about everything. So we did have a bit of a discussion earlier about sort of thinking about the economy. I think we've got to integrate everything. So it's economy, it's travel, it's quality of life, and it's all the other things, all the social programs and everything else, how that all fits together. We can't think about transport in isolation because I don't think that really works. We can come up with answers about what's the most viable system, but the picture and the questions and the sort of quality indicators are much wider than just can you get on a train within 5 minutes. It's very much about what is the quality of your life and are you going to be productive?
I think there's some work there. I throw it in the air because it's something that Sir Peter Hendy was looking at with First Group and with Stagecoach. And I don't think anybody's done that really good piece of work on that last mile or last few miles of, because like Peter says, he hasn't got endless car parking space he can offer people, and he wants people to travel sustainably to the stations. So I throw it in the air as a piece of work that somebody might want to pick up.
I mean, I think the last mile thing is a really important issue. And of course, in connected cities, that last mile is walkable. And what I do worry about is that a lot of people are sort of thinking about mobility as a service is just going to allow our cities to expand and expand. You're going to get sprawl and you take a railway or a tube or whatever to the edge of the city, and then you've still got 2 or 3 miles to get to your home. And so you're going to dial up an autonomous vehicle or whatever to get there. And that, to me, is the wrong way to go. We want to be thinking about more compact little settlements where you've got everything and you're not sort of ending up at the end of some kind of zone of a public transport system that leaves you stranded in the middle of nowhere.
No, I don't disagree with that. I think I agree with that fully.
I think one thing that we didn't unfortunately get an opportunity to say in the presentation, because obviously one's trying to put across a lot of information in a very short time, is that a large part of what Connected Cities focuses on is trying to keep commerce, activity and travel within a relatively short distance of where people live. So in other words, moving 2 or 3 stops up and down the line in order to go shopping or go to the cinema or go to work, but not to have to get on a train that will take you all the way into the city centre. That has certain advantages because the limits on the system are pinch points where all the lines come together to go into big metropolises and big cities. Outside those areas, there's actually lots of spare capacity. And if people didn't travel all the way into a city centre to do a job, but only travel 2 or 3 stops down the line, that is something that can be provided quite easily, relatively simply in comparison. So, and that really does give your rural development and the opportunity to do the kind of thing that Camilla just described. So we are at 17:53 according to my computer. I think at this point, John will probably say goodbye to everybody. thank you very much for attending. Really appreciate it all be here. And I do look forward to seeing you again not so far away on the 23rd of September. So thanks very much, and hopefully also in October, but cross one bridge at a time. Many thanks and goodbye. Cheers.
Yeah, bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Ciao.
Bye.